former Air Chief Marshal Naik, General Narona, the Chief of Staff of Southern Command, Dr. Vasudev Gade, the Vice Chancellor of Savitribai Phule Pune University, esteemed veterans from the Army, Navy and the Air Force, and the serving personnel of the three services present here, faculty members and students of the university. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I wish to convey my warm greetings of the day to all the people who are present here. And as was mentioned, actually, I must apologize for not being able to come yesterday, mainly because I had very pressing commitments last evening, and that meeting went on till late evening. As a result, I could not make it to this place. But I'm very happy that you all could make it on a holiday like this, Raksha Bandhan, and attend this lecture. I think it's a huge privilege and honor to be here this afternoon and interact with such a fine and distinguished gathering audience of professionals from the armed forces as well as the academia. I would like to thank Dr. Gade for inviting me to deliver this General B.C. Joshi Memorial lecture, which is held every year. I'm going to speak on the subject transformation of the Indian Air Force, challenges and opportunities. Before I come to the topic, I would like to pay my respectful tribute to General B.C. Joshi, as you all know, a former Chief of the Army Staff who died in harness, was a distinguished soldier and a leader and the highest kind of professional in the armed forces. He shared a unique and close relationship with the academia. His interest in academia and growth of our armed forces young officers in terms of acquiring professional knowledge in all the security, national security related issues was tremendous. So he made a lot of effort as a visionary ahead of his time to encourage research by our young officers from the armed forces to get involved in these activities. And in fact, the university and the armed forces program was given a tremendous impetus during his leadership as the Chief of the Army Staff. And as a result, a lot of officers, as was mentioned by the Vice, as many as 25 officers are today engaged in academic activities in terms of research and development in terms of national security issues. He was also instrumental in establishing the Army Institute of Technology in Pune for the children of the Army personnel. So, the armed forces will forever remain indebted to this great military leader for his patronage of higher studies. As far as the talk is concerned, in general, I'm going to speak on transformation of military power and especially aerospace power, because that is perhaps the most important component of military power. And thereafter, in particular, I'll speak about the transformation of the Indian Air Force, the challenges that we face today and the opportunities that are available to us to overcome these challenges and transform the Indian Air Force to be a multi-spectrum strategic force. From time immemorial, we all know that the strength of the army or the strength of the land forces have determined the military power of any nation, especially so in the past. It was the navies of powerful nations, seafaring nations, which actually capitalized on the advantages of maritime power, and it was mostly the European nations in the recent times who had very powerful navies who set sail across the oceans and colonize the entire world, all the continents, be it Africa, Asia, Australasia, and the two Americas. Aerospace power, of course, is the youngest among the Army, Navy, and Air Forces. So it's just about 110 plus years old. It is the youngest one, as I said, but it provides immense relief from the surface friction. It gives a lot of freedom from surface friction, which is inherent in the land and surface operations. In recent conflicts, we have seen that the aerospace power has demonstrated resounding success in conflicts in its ability to simultaneously interface as well as influence the outcome of the surface battles, be it on land or at sea. And this success of such battles on land and sea actually was uniquely dependent on the use of this third dimension, aerospace. Aerospace power had been used to protect our land forces and sea forces during the conflict, as also to use this offensive power against the adversary so as to prevent it mobilizing quickly, degrade it, attack continuously in an offensive manner, lower its morale, and finally, when that element of the adversary's forces join battle, they are totally demoralized and less effective. So the air forces or the aerospace power of the world over have matured over a period of time of over 100 plus 10 years, and having fought in so many conflicts in the recent past, it has evolved very rapidly. It has grown out of the shadows of its elder services, and it is considered to be the sharp end or the leading edge of any nation's combat power. So therefore, it will not be wrong if I say that the future will witness continued preeminence of aerospace power as primary instrument of choice in most operational contingencies, be it during a conflict, during a war, or during peacetime. Aerospace power will be the first respondent in any contingency. If we analyze history of nations and history of the world, we realize that states became great powers because they could demonstrate the mastery over creation, deployment, and use of military power towards achievement of national objectives. And military power is the most important component of comprehensive national power, which is synonymous with comprehensive national security. There are many indices which will contribute towards the comprehensive national power because CNP, Comprehensive National Power, has a wide canvas. I'll just go over some of the factors or indices which determines actually comprehensive national power. One amongst them, I would say very important, is economic development of a nation. As of now, India is growing rapidly, more than 7% plus growth in the GDP, and I'm sure we'll be able to sustain this for quite some time. So that economic development criteria is being looked after. A next important factor to my mind would be human resources development. We are the second largest populous country in the world, and in a few years' time will be the largest or the most populous country in the world. The human resources development is extremely important because if we can exploit the power of our human resources by giving them good education, giving them skill sets, job opportunities, then the country can develop by leaps and bounds. They become an asset, otherwise they might become disruptive in the development of the nation. And one-sixth of the world population is in India. Every sixth person in the world belongs to India, and our Indian diaspora is doing exceptionally well all over the world. So therefore, I think human resource development is a very important factor in the CNP. Science and technological base is an important factor. I think we are progressing quite well. The base is becoming stronger, and we need to work very hard in through research and development to develop core technologies which nobody is going to give us. So for strategic independence, we need to develop core technologies, and obviously development of science and technological base is extremely important. Natural resources, I think India has plenty. We have developed cyber, space, and nuclear capabilities. And of course, one of the most important factor in the CNP is good governance. If any nation wants to play an important role in the international arena, the nation has to invest adequately in the development of its military power. That there is no doubt. And India, as I said, is destined to play an important role in peace and stability of not only this region, but the entire world to my mind, because all the factors I spoke about indicates that India is going to play its role whether you want it or not. Now, having analyzed that, let's see what should be the composition of military power of a nation. Basically, there are two factors. One is threat perception and its mitigation, and the second would be what are the national objectives and aspirations of a nation, India as a nation. The size of the army in terms of number of strike corps that you want to have, the size of the navy in terms of aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines. So, the Air Force's capability to strike hard and deep in terms of offensive capability, all these factors has to be related to the threat perception and its mitigation, and of course national objectives and aspirations. Equally important factor is budget that you have. So economic development is extremely important, so the nation can spare the funds that is required to develop its military capabilities. So money is never enough for anyone. Even the best of the countries, most developed countries, they also feel that monies are not adequate for to meet their demands in terms of their capability requirements. In fact, recently in the USA, I met my counterpart, the US Air Force Chief. The first constraint, first, all I would say, point that he brought out, refrain, is that the funds that is being given to him by the government is totally inadequate to support the mandated operations of his Air Force. So I smiled and I wanted to tell him that if the largest Air Force in the world and the most rich and the powerful country has these problems, then I think the problem that we have in India is reasonable. Now, coming to the national objectives, to my mind, our national objectives are enshrined in the policies that you have followed over the last so many decades since independence. In terms of declarations, the Panchsheel, the NAM, as well as our participation in the United Nations, especially in peacekeeping operations. So those declarations actually give us an insight as to how India wants to deal with neighbors and others and how it wants to deal with security problems. To my mind, India has no territorial ambitions, but we have hostile borders. We have border disputes with two major powers in the region, and hence there is a need to develop our military capability. We have fought several conflicts and wars in the past, And every day you read about incursions, either at LSC or LC. The problem is live, and the armed forces are dealing with it every day. Our aim is to avoid conflicts. No, India does not want to start a conflict. We want to avoid a conflict. To do that, we should be able to deter anybody who is like to start a conflict. And to deter an adversary from starting of a conflict, I think you got to have military power which has got the offensive capability. You should have the offensive capability to strike deep into the heart of the enemy land, adversary's land, and create criticalities and vulnerabilities so that they will think twice before they start a conflict. As far as conventional conflict is concerned, we know that it's going to be short, swift, and intense. So whatever end states you want has to be achieved in a short period of time, especially we being a nuclear power and our adversaries are also nuclear power. So the world will be very concerned if there is any conflict in the region. So it has to be quickly ended, and we must achieve our military objectives, which in turn will give us the political objectives. And for that, you require a national instrument which will provide the best defense as well as deterrence. And to my mind, aerospace power has the unique attribute of speed, reach, footprint, and precision. It fits the bill well. It does not matter which component of aerospace power is with whom, but we definitely require this instrument to be very, very powerful to prevent a conflict. Let us now look at the geopolitical and security environment. A broad scan will show that the strategic gravity in the world has shifted to Asia and Asia Pacific. And it reveals there are many security challenges. First factor is growth of China, which is rapidly growing in economic strength. Of course, there are some problems now, but I'm sure they'll get over it soon. They're also using their economic strength to build up their military strength and infrastructure. That obviously has set alarm bells ringing. Everybody feels that the rise of China is inevitable, but the rise should be peaceful. But in that region, especially East China Sea and South China Sea, there have been some kind of assertiveness from the Chinese side, which has resulted in friction with the littoral states. The declaration of ADIZ, Air Defense Identification Zone, in international airspace in that area, then claims to island territories, development or reclamation of the island territories to build airfields, etc., is creating a lot of issues in the region. So we all hope that the rise of China will be peaceful, but we all know that there are about 5 or 6 contentious issues which the Chinese would like to resolve before things can settle down. Of course, Taiwan is one, Spratly Island, Senkaku Islands, and of course claims to various lost territories to various other nations, and the borders, unsettled border with India. Next is Pakistan and Afghanistan. We all know that Pakistan is the fountainhead of terrorism. It has joined the global war on terror, GWOT, but unfortunately, it is trying to run with the hares and hunt with the hounds in this matter. And in fact, one of very important political personalities in the US mentioned that Pakistan believes that it can have poisonous snakes in its backyard, thinking it will only bite the neighbors. But the reverse is happening. I think it's getting bitten more often than it's biting the neighbors. So that is the status as far as Pakistan is concerned. There is a lot of instability and there is a lot of violence. Of course, the IS is growing very rapidly in terms of its influence in the Middle East, be it uh, Syria, be it Iraq, and be it Libya. And Afghanistan is also in difficult times. The Taliban strength is only increasing. So terrorist acts is not abating, it's only increasing. Hence, the spectrum of conflict, which used to be conventional earlier, has increased from sub-conventional, that is terrorist acts, to conventional, to non-conventional, that is the nuclear threat. So the armed forces, the military power of a nation, has to contend with the entire spectrum of this kind of conflicts. Let us come to the Indian Air Force and our armed forces. Along with the Indian Army and the Indian Navy, the Indian Air Force is poised to contribute in stabilizing the region. Every nation in the region, be it our immediate neighbors, be it Southeast Asian nations, be it Far East Asian nations, and of course Europe and America, is looking forward to India to perform its role in terms of stabilizing the region and bringing balance in the relationship in the region. And I think, as I mentioned, Indian Army, Indian Navy, and the Indian Air Force is poised to have the strategic presence or footprint in our region as well as the world. Various roles that the Indian Air Force is performing as of now, I think there are three classical roles which I'd like to elaborate upon as a multi-spectrum strategic force. First is power projection. I mentioned that we have the strategic footprint available with us with the induction of C-17 strategic airlift, heavy airlift aircraft, C-130 special ops aircraft, a large number of Su-30s, AWACS, and then flight refueling, in-flight refueling aircraft. I think we have the capacity and capability to project ourselves anywhere in the world. And the best example, I'm not talking about only a conflict situation, but also HADR, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations. What you did in Yemen, the Navy and the Air Force there, in just about 2 days' time, we could fly out the Indian diaspora safely in about having deployed this large-bodied, heavy lift aircraft in that area. Similarly, in Nepal also, the response was so good, so quick, and you could see, you can call it power projection or assistance, but we are effective in the shortest possible time with the greatest means to help our friends or our people. Next classic role is deterrence. I talked about deterrence in the past. So deterrence, I think aerospace power can provide the maximum and the best deterrence because it has the weapons, it has the reach, it has the precision to actually be effective and take out the adversary if required. And I must say that since 1971, if there has been no large-scale conflict or full-fledged conflict, it's mainly because of the overwhelming superiority that we have, especially in the Air Force and the Army, that there has been peaceful, the region has been peaceful as far as conflict is concerned. Of course, the subversive acts from across the border continues. That's a different ball game. Third classic role that Indian Air Force is performing is protection. Air defense protection, that is air defense of the sovereign airspace, the airspace frontiers of the country. And I can tell you, in peacetime, nobody comes to know what the Air Force is doing, but it is or working 24 by 7 in the air defense role, where fighter aircraft and helicopters are armed to intercept any intruders and seek a arms solution if required. Our radars are churning all the time, especially in the disturbed areas along the borders, and we are always prepared. And it's actually a huge task and responsibility that you're performing. And I must tell you, nearly 6,000 civil flights and 1,500 military flights are operating every day. And civil aviation is only going to increase exponentially in the future. And therefore, the challenge is going to be even greater. The Indian Air Force has to make sure that each and every flight that gets airborne is properly tracked, and we know who is friendly, who is unknown, and who is hostile. But the biggest challenge in protection today is, I think, the unregulated flying, unregulated aerial, sub-conventional aerial threats. We have large number of people and clubs who are flying this, microlights, gliders, parasailing, and hydrocopters, and so many other, devices. But these are going to be a huge security concern in the near future. So we are trying to coordinate with the civil authorities so that this is regulated and there is proper control exercised not only by the Air Force but also the civil administration and the police. Peacetime roles, we have plenty. We are doing air maintenance of our army as well as paramilitary forces and the state governments in the northern areas and northeastern areas. We airlift more than 35,000 tons of logistic material to support our troops engaged in the high mountains or supporting all the paramilitary forces located in this area, including some of the agencies which are trying to build infrastructure in this area. We are also involved in providing logistic support to the paramilitary forces who are involved in anti-Naxal operations in central and eastern parts of the country. We've been involved since 2009, and large number of helicopters are taking part daily. We are airlifting these paramilitary forces, their logistic support, etc., every day. I mentioned about the HADR in peacetime. Our performance has been exceptional, and our response has been so quick and so timely that everybody is appreciating the effort made by the Indian government, and I think that quick response has been achieved because of the good capability of the Indian Air Force in terms of carrying our troops, equipment, food, water, medicines, medical teams, and other logistic support in very quick time. In fact, the example I would like to give you is Nepal earthquake. The moment we came to know our aircraft are ready, our people are ready, and as soon as the orders came from the government, within an hour, all the NDRF, their people, their equipment, their logistics, everything arrived, and in 2 hours' time we were airborne. And in 4 hours' time we are there helping out the Nepalese people to fight or in rescue and relief operations of the affected people. And in fact, the Nepalese people themselves didn't understand that how could we react so quickly and be there before they could be prepared. And we get a lot of letters and accolades from the international community on this issue. So there is a perceptual change in the world community that India is going to lead in any HIDR operations, doesn't matter which part of the world is affected. I'll now cover some of the challenges which are unique to the Indian Air Force and the Indian Army as well. First is the terrain. There is no Air Force or Army in the world which operates in such variety of terrains. We operate from the Himalayas which is snow-clad, altitude between 12,000 to 20,000 feet is normal. Every day we operate from there. We operate in the deserts, the third deserts, where the temperatures are very high and very sandy, dusty. We operate from tropical forests that we have in our country, especially in the northeast, very thick, dense jungles, so humidity is extremely high. We also operate from the coastal regions since we have a very huge coastline, which has its own effects in our maintenance activities. So, when you fly in such difficult terrain, there is no margin for error. Especially our helicopter pilots, single engine helicopters are flying in Siachen at a height of 22,000 feet to support the troops on the ground. What you require is skill of the highest order, a lot of guts, professionalism, because anybody who's flown in that area can understand the dangers. And it's only because these people have the guts and professionalism that they do it day in and day out, 365 days in a year. I'll show you one clip of our operations from advanced landing ground in DBO, that is Daulat Beg Oldie, which is the highest landing ground in the world at an altitude of 17,000 feet. This is the C-130 Special Ops aircraft landing at Daulat Beg Oldie, which is very close to the Chinese borders, just about 10 kilometers. It's a semi-prepared surface, a lot of sand and soft soil. The manufacturer of this aircraft says you are not permitted to fly from an airfield beyond 12,000 feet. But we told them that we'll show it to you that you can do it from even higher altitudes. And we did it from 17,000 feet and they were amazed. So that is the kind of capability Indian Armed Forces and the Indian Air Force has developed. Okay. Next challenge is engaging targets. In the mountains, if you miss the target by even half a meter, that weapon may land up 3 kilometers away because of the gorges and the type of terrain. In the desert, it's very difficult to acquire a target unless it is moving. If it is still, it is almost impossible to acquire the target. In the jungles, because of the foliage, it is difficult to determine where the target is. So to penetrate the foliage, you require special sensors so that the pilot can see where the target is and then target it accurately. We also have the problem of training the crew. The crew has to be operational in all types of terrains. So our training needs of each pilot increases manifold. Next challenge is, of course, maintenance. Maintenance of all our equipment, all our weapon platforms and aircraft in the desert because of sand, dust and heat becomes very difficult. Most of the avionics start failing at those high temperatures. Similarly, if the humidity is very high, it has an effect on the serviceability of our avionics. Corrosion in the coastal areas is a big problem. So these are the issues we have to look after in terms of maintenance of our systems. Exploitation of technology is the next big challenge. We have equipment which originates from at least 4 different sources. We have Russian equipment in large quantities. We have Western equipment from Europe. We have US equipment and we have our own indigenous equipment. So we have large number of inventories and then it becomes very difficult to manage the inventory. So we have dynamic inventory management through integrated material management online systems. So you're making use of technology and software to manage your inventories. But more importantly, how to make these systems whose philosophy, which is sourced from various sources, their philosophy of operations, philosophy of maintenance is so varied. So that is the biggest challenge and we've been able to master that and we make all of them interoperable. And in fact, when you interact with other air forces, they get amazed that Indian Air Force has the capacity and capability to integrate so many varied equipment from various sources and make them fully functional and interoperable. Next challenge is, of course, lack of adequate indigenous capability. We are dependent on most of our hardware from abroad, and unfortunately, our DPSUs have not been able to generate the capability, the indigenous capability that our leaders in the past have been thinking of, and that's why they are set up, be it the DRDO or DPSU. Unfortunately, they have not been able to indigenize the production of these core technologies, core equipment, and hence we continue to be dependent on OEMs from foreign lands. And that results in repair and overall and turnaround time of all the spares and repairables to a very large time frame, and affects obviously our availability of our platforms. Budget is always a constraint, as I was mentioning, because we always feel the acquisition of equipment and the revenue budget to support operations day to day, we always short, and especially with so many commitments to meet in terms of HADR, etc. We spend half our revenue budget towards that. As a result, we are unable to do adequate training for ourselves or support the army whenever it's required, because we don't have those spares available, because not having been able to contract for the spares. Exchange rate variation is another factor. When you pay for various equipment, the committed liabilities that is there, because of the depreciation of the rupee, we have to pay much more. So that's a big drain on our budget available. The acquisition process is another hindrance, I would say. The acquisition process takes too long. All of us know that, everybody, from a politician to a minister to a bureaucrat to a normal civilian and the armed forces people, everybody knows that our acquisition time is very, very long. So a lot of measures are being instituted to rectify the situation. But I think there is a thought process that most of the strategic, I would say most of the big purchases that we make from outside, it should not be merely a commercial deal. It has to be a strategic consideration. You require it for the defense of the nation, for the security of the nation. So we should actually go for a government to government deal, so that we get the equipment quickly and not take too long by following certain procedures which have been instituted. So that is the other issue that is being resolved, and I'm sure, like in the past, we had a lot of government to government deals to get our equipment. Same thing will happen in the future as well. I think I've spoken a lot about the constraints or the challenges, but there are opportunities as well. I think with the Make in India policy, letting the private sector play an important role in establishing defense industries, that is military industrial complexes as joint ventures, transfer of technology will take place, and I must tell you that a lot of effort is being made in this direction. The recent government policies of giving such contracts to joint ventures wherein our private sector is getting involved is going to pay huge dividends. We also have the 30% to 50% offset policy of any major contract. That money will be invested in the country, so all our private sectors and the DPSUs will get involved in true transfer of technology. But more importantly, I think if you do the analysis of the military industrial complexes the world over, you'll find most of them are in Europe, Russia, and America. But in Europe, there is peace and stability, I would say, for quite some time. In fact, all the armed forces in the world are downsizing. The budgetary allotments are reducing. The number of people in the armed forces is reducing. The equipment share is reducing. It's only in India and Asia, I would say, where there is a lot of demand for military hardware. So because these military industrial complexes are in those developed countries and there is no demand for them in those countries, they are all at the wit's end that how will they survive if they cannot sell their hardware. So they're all coming, making a beeline to come to India and set up shop. So that is a great opportunity that we can exploit for transfer of technology and also develop our indigenous capability, especially in the core technologies. A few words on the transformation plan of the Indian Air Force. As I mentioned, that we'd like to go through that, besides the challenges and the opportunities. Indian Air Force is developing into a multi-spectrum strategic force. We have a long-term integrated perspective plan, which is going to run over 3 plan periods, and it will materialize by 2027. Since obsolescence is a huge factor in the modernization or the capability of any air force, especially air force because it's a high-tech service, it hits each and every air force. So there are well laid out plans for replacement of the old equipment. But if we don't get them in time because of the processes involved in the country, we are trying to preserve and maintain whatever legacy equipment we have much longer than it should have been in operational use. So towards that, a lot of work is being done. It takes more time to maintain an old equipment. If you have an old car, it will break down more often. You will require more effort to maintain it and do more repairs to sustain its availability or operational use. That is the first step. Second is that all these weapon platforms and systems have a life which is about 25 to 30 years normally, and about halfway through its life the technological advances overtake those initial capabilities of these systems, that we need to upgrade them so that they remain operationally viable and they remain relevant. So that midlife upgrade is a norm, and that is what we are doing to most of our fleets, most of our equipment, be it the Mirage 2000, the MiG-29 fleet, the Jaguar fleet, AN-32 transport aircraft fleet, and even the Su-30 is planned for midlife upgrade. And of course, replacement of the legacy equipment once its technical life is over, and acquire new systems, etc., so that we can build up to whatever level the government has sanctioned in terms of force levels. Toward this, we are trying to get the light combat aircraft indigenously built by HAL and the ADA, that is the DRDO. We are trying to get the MMRCA, you all have heard about the Rafale, and we are also trying to build the AMCA, the Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft, and of course the replacement of the Avro, which is in the news nowadays. We are happy that we've been able to operationalize the C-130 special ops aircraft. One squadron, 6 aircraft. The second squadron is in the process of being inducted. By the end of next year, it will be there with us. C-17s, we have operationalized 10 aircraft, strategic airlift, heavy lift aircraft, and it has really given us tremendous strategic footprint. We also operationalized a large number of medium lift helicopters like the Mi-17 V5s, and it is also giving us a lot of benefits in terms of mobilization and helping the army to operate effectively. We are in the process of inducting the Chinooks, that is the heavy lift helicopter, and Apache attack helicopters. The process is on, and I think it should materialize soon. Let me cover some of the focus areas of the Indian Air Force. First, as I said, is induction. Induction is important because we have a lot of legacy equipment. Induction of weapon platforms, the FGFA, 5th generation fighter aircraft, is there in the process. I mentioned of the AMCA. Other fighters may also be inducted like the Rafale, and of course the LCA. We also have plans and in the process of inducting large number of surface to air guided weapon systems. Akash system, as you all know, is already being inducted and operationalized. Large number of radars indigenously built by the DRDO and the Bell have been operationalized. So very soon, I think we'll have enough in our inventory to look after their defense requirement. We are getting more flight refueling aircraft called the MRTT, multi-role transport tankers. The AWACS India program is on, and many other equipment. The next focus area is, of course, to maintain the potency of the existing equipment by providing better support so that the availability of these fleets are better. We give them potency through electronic warfare capabilities, better weapons, that is precision guided ammunitions with standoff capability, and laser designation pods so that we can attack with greatest of accuracies, and hence its effectiveness is much more. So that is there in the pipeline. A lot of things have started coming in already. The next focus area is of course, is building the op infrastructure in terms of hardened aircraft shelters, weapon storage areas, extension of ALGs, advanced landing grounds, especially in the north and the northeast, and of course, resurfacing of the runways which are in disuse or not in good condition, building hangars for aircraft, aircraft storage as well as servicing, labs for maintenance of all the equipment. We are also practicing landing on highways. We have determined with the highways authorities building good roads all over the country, especially in the border areas. We are working with the state governments and the NHAI, determining stretches of highways where we can actually operate fighter aircraft. So that will give us a lot of flexibility. We are also operating from AI controlled airfields, so that will also give us a lot of flexibility in terms of operations in a contingency. Next focus area is, of course, training. It is not the next, I think it is the most important one as of now. We had some problems because we didn't have a basic trainer aircraft for some time. Then we got hold of the basic trainer aircraft, the PC-7 pilotus. We got about 70 of them out of 75 that was contracted. The government has approved another 38, and has also approved, manufacture of indigenously built HTT-40 aircraft by HAL. So we're just looking forward to those. So this has brought our ab initio training of pilots almost back on track, of course with deficiencies. We also have the AJT, the Advanced Jet Trainer, the Hawk in large numbers, but the IJT is way behind, Intermediate Jet Trainer, and now we are resorting to doing 3-stage training on 2 types of aircraft in the ab initio stage. So that is a constraint, but definitely will require more BTAs and AJTs when we don't have the IJT. So this is being considered by the government, and we are very hopeful that they will be able to meet our requirements when we require it. Ab initio training in human resource development, because of the induction of new technologies, the high-tech equipment that we're getting nowadays, we are all the time tweaking our syllabus, syllabi, as well as making changes so that we adapt to the new means, new technologies, and we are done considerably well towards the induction of new technologies and preparing our air warriors to be an asset in this regard. Very important focus area is retention of highly qualified professionals in the Air Force. Many of them wanted to leave because of better or greener pastures in the civil life, and they're highly trained, highly professional. So what we are doing is trying to improve the quality of life and the standard of living in all our stations. And in fact, a lot has been done to provide better accommodation, sports facilities, physical fitness, entertainment facilities, shopping centers, and more importantly, I would say, educational facilities. So if we can look after his education of the children and look after the family by giving the accommodation and give all these facilities, I think the retention of highly qualified personnel of the Air Force will not be a big problem. We're also looking forward to the 7th Pay Commission to give it us a good deal so the people stay on with the Air Force. International cooperation is another area. We have been taking part right from the beginning. It has increased in the recent times. We have engaged the Russians as well. We never did exercise the Russians earlier. UK, US, France, Singapore, Oman, UAE, Thailand, Malaysia, a large number of countries, South Africa. We've been doing international bilateral or trilateral exercises. And in fact, we learn a lot from that. One is we adopt and learn the best practices internationally. We become interoperable and people develop huge respect for the armed forces of India. Next is network-centric warfare capability. I think that is going to be the future, and the Indian Air Force is taking the lead in the respect. We have the ground network already fully functional. We are going to have the airborne network once we commission the operational data link, which will be commissioned very soon. And the space network is partially available, and we are going to enhance the space network with availability of ISR, that is intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance satellites, which are being launched often, and Indian regional navigation satellite system like the GPS, Global Positioning System, we'll have our own. So all these things are going on. We are going to develop our capabilities both in space and cyber, which is going to be extremely important in the near future, because that is the area where nations are extremely vulnerable, and the next conflict or war is going to be a silent warfare through space and cyber. We are getting geared up for that as well. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, I've given a brief overview of the IAF's roles, its challenges and opportunities, its transformation plan, and our focus areas. In any operational contingency in the future, it will demand control of the air, good situational awareness of what is happening in the airspace, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, etc. Using these assets, of which belongs to aerospace, we'll be able to deliver in terms of deterrence, and if there is a conflict, in terms of reaching the end state militarily in the quickest possible time. We have increased strategic footprint because we have acquired those assets. We have increased our air mobility, airlift capability. We got the force enhancers like AWACS, flight refueling aircraft, etc. And we are emphasizing on network-centric warfare capability, cyber and space domain capability. Obviously, these three things will keep the armed forces, especially the Air Force, relevant in future threat environment. The core competency in exploitation of aerospace power, as you all know, does lie with the Air Force, especially in terms of offensive strike capability. It is the best deterrence that is available, and aerospace power will remain the primary instrument of military power in the near future. As far as capability building is concerned, I think it's a continuous and long-term endeavor, and it requires good planning, visionary planning, commitment of national resources, and participation of each and every stakeholder. Thank you. Jai Hind.